Good morning and welcome to Real Estate Economics webinar series. I'm John Mulville, Senior Vice President of Consulting here at Real Estate Economics, and I'll be leading us through today's topic, which is appreciation. Where, when, and most importantly, why. Today, we'll answer the following questions. What is the current pricing outlook? If there is going to be appreciation, when will it begin? How long will prices rise? How will the pattern develop? And how would the appreciation play out year by year? What local or regional factors are driving this appreciation, and what factors would produce appreciation rates higher or lower than our forecast? To talk about appreciation in a general sense, we're going to look at the national market, the entire U.S. And what goes into this forecast? Interest rates, household incomes. What portion of the household income will people allocate to the mortgage payment? And if you're looking at a MSA or region, there's quite a few demographic factors to consider. What are the ages of the households? Are these households in the asset accumulation stage, looking for move-up or family product, or are they looking for a mature product and downsizing into smaller homes? What are the industries and employment conditions in a given area? What are the percentages of renters versus owners? There are markets that people migrate to specifically to own, and other places where renters are in far higher concentrations. And what are the percentage of two-earner households? Obviously, two earners can produce much greater income. That's why we frequently see ownership move up over time and incomes move up over time as areas urbanize. So let's start with where are we today? Let's look at the employment by supersector for the United States, September of 2011. By and large, the economy is performing at least a decent level in most industry groups. What we find is that government is suffering, residential housing is suffering, and many finance banking sectors are suffering. But outside of those areas, the economy tends to be performing fairly well. I saw a recent interview with Warren Buffett. He said he owned 110 separate businesses, and outside of residential housing, all of his businesses were performing better in 2010 than they had in 2009, and he had the inclination that they would perform better in 2011 than they had in 2010. So that's a real macro perspective from someone in a position to know. What we see is, continued degradation in the government sector. Higher interest rates are going to continue to be a problem on the government side. There's been a lot of shuffling of money around from one area to another in many municipalities. We've started to see some state and larger bankruptcies and many budget shortfalls. The American Recovery ARRA, American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, ended last June, and so many municipalities have yet to really feel the full brunt of their budget shortfalls. We expect that to play out for some time. Leisure and hospitality remains strong. Professional business services, even though there might be quite a few bankruptcy attorneys in there, that area is strong. Trade, transportation, and utilities appears to be pretty good. Manufacturing has shown growth in output for I believe it's 6 straight quarters, to the point that we're starting to see increasing automation and people making capital investments to improve their productivity. And last, kind of a historically small sector, natural resources and mining has been performing well with a renewed interest in rare earth elements and natural gas exploration. Even the small construction sector here in California, it seems as if every road we're on is under construction, so maybe there were a few near shovel-ready projects out there. Today, on a national valuation basis, this is where we stand. Those of you who have seen our work before, we show in the blue line is the historical or forecast median home price for the outer years. And in green, we have the supportable median home price. So what is the supportable median home price? That is median household income for a given area, in this case the United States, factoring in interest rates and factoring in how much will a typical household allocate from their household income to the mortgage payment. We have very long-standing data on all of these particular pieces of the puzzle, and you can tell going way back when people are over allocating to the home, and we'll talk about that more today. If you see nationally, the historical and the supportable were quite closely tied from the beginning of the table on the far left all the way through January 2003 when subprime started to heat up, and then we had a complete disconnect in prices and incomes. Come forward to 2009 and you see a sudden spike in the supportable median home price. That's when the Federal Reserve began to suppress interest rates, and that particular point in time was about a 100 basis point cut in rates that immediately makes mortgage payments smaller when rates drop like that, and leads the supportable median home price higher in the subsequent periods. So where are we today? In the little dotted line that runs north to south, we're extremely undervalued on a national basis and in many of the submarkets and regions that we study. That undervaluation looks to carry out for several years from this point in time and not really equal what we would call a fair or equilibrium value until 2016. This varies quite a bit by MSA. So if you've seen our other webinars, you probably have an idea which ones are doing well and which ones are not. On a national basis for 2012, homes are severely undervalued. I'd call your attention to the middle column, annual mortgage costs. If you see the annual mortgage costs for 2012, $8,246 per year. That's the lowest number we can see in here. And if you would have to go back into the 1990s to find a point in time where it only took $8,246 or thereabouts to afford the median home price. And now really what's producing that? Very low interest rates and slow, generally unimpressive increases in median household income. So by definition, we call this market undervalued, in this case severely undervalued, to the tune of about $44,000 or about 25%. Now people often ask us, why doesn't the market respond to this undervaluation? If homes are such a great deal, why isn't everybody out there buying? Well, of course, sentiment is poor, employment, many people are unemployed or underemployed, and there's still a perception that homes may not hold their current values going forward, and we'll talk to that a little bit today. So what's our forecast change in median price? Well, you can see what's happened over the years. From 1991 to about 2004, 2005, annual appreciation was always above 2.5%. In some years it reached up into the higher single digits, only to be hit hard by the subprime era. But look at 2010, 2011, 2012, minus 0.1, minus 0.8, 1.2. For those of you who follow these national indexes and the 10 and 20 market area forecasts, I think what we've been seeing is general stability in a lot of markets. Some are underperforming, some are performing better. Many are clunking along the bottom with relatively minor price degradation. We think we're getting to the point where we've got increasing stability, and the severe undervaluation is going to start giving us a little appreciation. Now on a national basis, our 5-year forecast, 1.2%, 2.0%, 3.4%, 3.9%, and 4.0%. There are many markets that will perform far better than this, and also some markets that are still undergoing pretty significant economic adjustments that we'll also talk to a little bit today. So in short, we're seeing really the beginning of small appreciation in 2012, accelerating over the back years. Now most of us might not feel 1.2%. In many markets that'll be relatively small numbers, and it won't appear, it'll appear gradually. It might have fits and starts, go up 2% one quarter, down 1.5% the next quarter. But we think, even though we've got pretty significant distressed inventory, that we're really clunking along the bottom here and setting a price floor. If you look at national prices on a long-term basis, 1990 through the end of our forecast period in 2016, I drew the red line, compounded rate of change for that entire time period, 2.77%. So prices have not appreciated wildly in the United States. We've had severe appreciation and valuation acceleration in undersupplied markets and in markets with extremely strong industries. But on a national basis, 2.77%. You'll be interested to note that household income has grown by about 2.07% during that same time period. So appreciation has been slightly greater than in household income growth. Now, if you take out the subprime era and the points in time that we've been fighting back from the subprime value overstatement, the trend line is pretty supportable. It almost looks like we've cut out the top. If you take off the top, you take off the bottom, we're almost returning to previous year's trend growth. Let's look at mortgage interest rates. As you can see, 2012, we have our cycle trough in rates, 4.3%. Bookended by 4.5% for this year and for 2013. Interest rates tend to be very long cycle impacted. A typical interest rate cycle is about 30 years. You can track that going way back into the 15 and 1600s with a little bit of variation in the Industrial Revolution and some other temporary factors. But even going back to the 80s in the U.S., we've had steadily declining rates, which has really acted to give home prices a tailwind for a period of 30 years. Now, if we're correct, and these forecast years we start to see a little bit higher rates, higher rates are very difficult to leverage home purchases. It takes a lot more income to afford a home if rates go from 4.3 to 6.4%. So we think at the point in time that the market starts to understand rates are rising, buyers will get off the fence and there will be a push to get into a home and tie down some long-term money at low rates in a rising interest rate environment. Household incomes for the U.S., pretty steady, long-term growth year over year. We've started to see from the census data that some markets are performing well, but a number of markets have had pretty severe degradation in their household incomes. Some places we haven't really seen much growth on a 5 or 10-year basis, and we're also seeing growing differential between gross pay, if you will, and take-home pay. It seems like taxes are up in many areas, utility costs, it seems like the school wants you to pay for this and that and the other thing, fuel costs are way up. So the differential between gross and net is as big as it's ever been, and that really leaves people fewer resources to deleverage, improve their household balance sheets, and also to save for a down payment for a home. So that tells us we think buyers will be price-focused generally for years to come and will tend to purchase maybe a smaller or more affordable home than they could and might have historically. We talked earlier about what goes into our median supportable house prices. That included household income we just talked about, interest rates we just talked about, and also household income allocations. What portion of the household income will people contribute or allocate to the mortgage? So on the right-hand side of this page, I've shown what that number is historically. Back in 1990, the mortgage cost was about 24.1% of household income, and that's come all the way down to 20.4% in the last few years. Now, I would sort of tend to look at this on a fully loaded or all-in basis. I bet if you took, taxes, real estate taxes, insurance costs, the various costs that we know go with home ownership, I don't know that this allocation is that much changed. There are probably monies being drawn off to other related parts of home ownership aside from the mortgage. But you can see, as an allocation basis, people have not been paying significantly more or allocating significantly more to the home purchase in the last 20 to almost 30 years. So what factors might impact our forecast? I thought it would be best to look at this on a strong economy, weak economy basis. On one hand this, on the other hand that. On the strong economy side, rates will tend to rise. More income will be needed to buy the same home. We've talked about the poor equation regarding to leverage of higher rates, household incomes will probably rise, partially offsetting rates, but it's very difficult for household incomes to rise quickly enough to offset mortgage rates that went from 4 to 5 to 6 in a couple of year periods. When the economy is strong, households tend to be more confident. They're more willing to allocate money to their mortgage payment. They're more willing to move up the price ladder, and they're more willing to buy to the full extent of their financial condition. By comparison, let's look at a weak economy. Rates stay low. More income isn't needed to buy the home. When household incomes stay flat or decline, people tend to have problems qualifying for a loan or paying for the loan that they're presently in. Sentiment remains poor. Households rent or stay in the same accommodations. We've certainly seen that in the Southern California market. There is a large rental pool these days who we know could afford to buy, who are choosing not to. And at the same time, there's a growing rental pool of people who have been in a home for many years who couldn't afford to stay any longer. So really, what's the bottom line? On a national basis, our 5-year appreciation totals 14.5%, about 2.9% annually. Only by 2015 to 2016 will home prices be back to a fair value or equilibrium value. I think this is absolutely essential to understand. If we get 4 or 5 years of appreciation, we're not going to new highs or to some stratospheric plateau or some area that valuation would be an issue. We're coming back to the waterline. We're coming back to equilibrium. We're coming back to a historical fair value or equilibrium number. By that time, 2015 to 2016, incomes and prices will once again be aligned. Market forces are forcing these into alignment, and the current undervaluation will be largely erased. Of course, this will vary market to market, but we'll see pressure back towards an equilibrium condition. MSA performance will vary. If you've seen our webinars for different areas, the dynamics are very different. The employment dynamics, the demographic dynamics. We've seen across the country, MSAs that compete internationally face tremendous wage pressures. Wages are equalizing across the globe. Businesses and industries and job functions that can be sent overseas to lower cost providers have been in the past 10 and 20 years, and the American worker faces quite a bit of pressure there. Also, there's markets with high transportation costs, high utility costs, high taxes, and high regulations. We see businesses relocating out of these cities, counties, and states into much friendlier environments, trying to find a better profit setting. MSAs that only compete domestically or are highly specialized are far more insulated. The fabulous example of that, of course, is Silicon Valley. It's proven to be a magnet for high-tech workers from across the globe. It's hard to outsource a lot of it. It's hard to change. People come there with ideas. Venture capital is there. It's its own self-feeding and self-fulfilling prophecy. One of the things we'd like to talk about is, since our appreciation part of our appreciation is offsetting the severe undervaluation that's currently in place, markets that have had the strongest fundamentals and experienced only moderate price losses during the economic and real estate market disruption may not have hugely robust appreciation as that undervaluation becomes offset and is erased. Those stronger markets haven't been hit as hard and don't have quite as far to bounce. Many people call us about cheap markets. We see the numbers in Vegas, we see the numbers in Phoenix, and some of those markets are so beaten down. You could clearly get a decent bounce in some of these places, but at the end of the day, the fundamentals are quite often the same, and they may not have the capacity to sustain appreciation over time. I thought it would be interesting to look at a couple of different markets and see the trends that are in place in those markets and compare them to other places around the country. So let's start with Atlanta. Atlanta had the very interesting circumstance of having large supply added year after year. Atlanta was always near the top of the ratings when it came to building permits pulled annually. People were flocking to Atlanta. It was the place where a lot of businesses were relocating. It was really the place to be in the mid-2000s. That kept supply levels high, so prices didn't run up quite as severely in Atlanta as they have in some other places. At the same time, incomes didn't grow that fast. It was an attractive area to move, people flocked in, and therefore competition kept wages down. So if you can see in this particular chart, the supportable median home price didn't really run up. The undervaluation, although significant, is a little bit less than some of our other markets. Look at the supportable median home price going forward. We just don't have that great of income growth in this market, and that coupled with the higher rates is going to keep a lid on price appreciation here. We still have an undervaluation, a couple of years of opportunity, and even by 2017, this market's not back to an equilibrium condition. Big change, moving to Reno Sparks. Here's an area where subprime loans were used heavily. Household income has grown fairly decently here until the middle of the subprime era. The real problem is we just got so disconnected price-wise that there's been a severe negative reaction to that. The differential, the undervaluation is huge in this market at this time. Of course, Nevada is suffering from the highest unemployment rate of any of the states. Gaming, leisure, hospitality, hotels have all suffered from increasing competition from Macau and gaming centers in Dubai and other places that's drawn off some of their tourism. But we have severe undervaluation here. This area attracted a lot of people priced out of Northern California and parts of the California markets, and even in this market, we're just barely going to be back to an equilibrium condition by 2017 with some fairly decent appreciation between the present and year 2017. How about Denver? This is really one of the best performing markets, at least in the West. This area has far greater income growth and price growth than we've seen in the past, or the last two markets. Price appreciation here, if you recall, the U.S. was 2.77%. This area is about 4.1%. You can see there's really not been a drawdown in supportable median home price. Prices have risen steadily throughout the time period of this table as incomes rose pretty good in this area. One of the things we saw here that we observed in many technologically oriented markets is the markets that had dot-com bubbles were consolidating and really pulling back after the dot-com meltdown. That left them poorly positioned or really unavailable to experience an immediate come-on of a subprime meltdown. So those areas that were still shaken up from the dot-com really didn't get a blow-off in prices during the subprime era, and that's left them essentially better positioned as we sit here today. There is some undervaluation in this market, but look, we reached equilibrium as soon as 2015 and still have a decent appreciation environment. And last, one of the poster children for distress across the U.S., the Stockton market. This is another area where it was subprime. Only through subprime could people acquire homes. The income support is fairly poor. This is an area that's generally far from jobs. It kind of worked at $2 gas. It's not going to work well at all with $4 fuel costs. This is an area that sustained repeated boom and bust cycles. Still, the undervaluation is severe. There's several years of potentially strong price appreciation, although this is really one of those markets that may not have the fundamentals to support price growth over an extended time period. Last interesting note on this particular table is the price appreciation in this market's about 2.1%, so it almost mirrors the national price appreciation. That really tells us if we're going to build homes in volume, you've got to be in the right markets, you've got to be in markets with positive employment and demographic fundamentals, or you will simply not have the suitable pricing environment. So what can we say about our appreciation analysis today? We got two major price trends are unfolding. First, the undervaluation is beginning to dissipate. Rates are still low, homes are more affordable than ever. For those people in industries that are not really beaten down like residential real estate, the economic climate is decent. And those people can generally afford homes if we had a little bit better sentiment. It was a little easier to qualify for a loan. We think that some of this excess inventory would mop up fairly quickly. It's going to take a little while for us to get a sentiment change, but when that comes, it might be abrupt and severe or steep. Second, we think interest rates are approaching their cycle lows. After that, higher rates will act to make the houses more or less affordable, more expensive, and that will help bring supportable prices down. So equilibrium prices are really being pushed up by undervaluation and down by higher interest rates. Those are opposing forces. They're pushing in the same direction. They're making prices more supportable, more stable, and out a couple of years we'll have much, much better price stability than we do at present. I think really if you look around the MSAs of the country, one of the things you've really got to follow is where are the high growth industries locating? Where are those employers choosing to locate or relocate? Every day in California there's a commercial to relocate your business to a different market, and a lot of those sorts of relocations have taken place. Look and watch where those relocations are going. Those are the markets to be in, not the markets that can't seem to hold a steady work base. International demand is strong and appears to be accelerating. We've seen this, in the West Coast, in the Seattle, San Francisco, San Diego markets, Miami, of course, and always New York. There's many places across the world where it's difficult to own a home or any sort of real estate. The housing stock is pretty crummy. The choices are all driven by the government. It's old and run down. So when people make a little money, begin to travel internationally, locate in the U.S., relocate in the U.S., buying a home is really usually pretty close to the top of the list. One last thing we'd like to call out today is we'd say to everyone, keep your eye on the House of Representatives and Senate Super Committee on Deficit Reduction. The government likes to delay and move back on things, but there are some parts of the deficit reduction bill that would call for automatic cuts. Those cuts are very oriented to defense. And so if your market area is exposed or reliant on the Department of Defense, DoD spending, you might want to pay close attention to this. So what was our conclusions? Our current pricing outlook is we think we've reached a price trough, at least nationally and in many markets. Of course, there's quite a bit of variety, MSA to MSA, but on a general basis, we're seeing slower declines, improved price support, and we're really positioning ourselves for at least modest appreciation as we undo the undervaluation. Appreciation starts slow. It's already observed in some markets, not quite come into some other markets. It really depends on the economic climate, the industries in your area, but we do have many markets across the country that are showing positive improvement. We think prices will rise from 2012, probably at least on a 5, 6, maybe 7 or 8 year basis as this cycle first remediates the undervaluation and then probably becomes a little bit overvalued, as is typical in the back years of a housing market cycle. What location or regional factors are driving the appreciation? We've really talked about this in terms of employment. You've got to be with vibrant industries, got to be with vibrant employers if you want to sell homes in volume. And we've also talked about our strong and weak market appreciation factors that might change the forecast depending on your MSA, depending on your economic climate. I'm John Mulville, Senior Vice President again. Here's my contact information if you are interested in anything we presented today. Would like to discuss your particular market area, feel free to give us a call. You can find our webinar schedule for our regular webinar series at www.realestateeconomics.com. We are also on YouTube, where you can find our past webinars for viewing at your convenience. Thank you for joining us today, and please join us for our upcoming webinars.